Hello everypony, and welcome to the sixth and final part of our in-depth tutorial on how to draw MLP vectors. I'm Featherbrain, as I have been for the last 5 parts of this tutorial, and though it does make me sad to say this is the final part of our tutorial, I'm sure all of you are greatly relieved because this is probably taking quite a bit of your time, assuming you watched through all of these in their entirety. Now I did record audio before this as I was going through and making all our final changes to our vector, but I had some stumbling blocks I came across, and I really didn't want you to have to watch through all of that while I floundered in trying to figure out exactly how to solve all our problems. So instead, I'm going to just review quickly on exactly what I changed and how I changed it, and then at the end of this tutorial give you some final tips and parting words of wisdom before I say farewell. So, diving right in, so we don't waste your time, I have circled all the changes I made to our vector from the previous tutorial before I changed them, so we can see exactly what I changed, and it's easy for you to visualize that I have it circled. So, really quickly, most of these changes are going to be layer and line width issues that we changed. Some very simple ones, for example, is her nose here. I recognized after I had drawn it that it wasn't quite matching up to the proper shape, as you can see here. So I made that change in our final vector. It's not really an abundantly huge difference, but it's enough to, I think, complement the rest of our vector nicely. Another issue you can see here is with her eyelashes. I hadn't changed the width on them yet, so I went ahead and did that and lined them up to kind of just mesh nicer with the outer part of her eye. And that, again, all that was done with Shift W, our width tool, with eyelashes. So again, for those of you who don't remember, all you have to do to change them is you can double click and manually type in the width you want to change it, or you can actually just click on it using your selection tool and change the stroke width and width profile to make it match better. For the nose, all I did was use the direct selection tool and changed the handle, moved the handle so that our curve was a bit more extreme. Other points of change were up here on her mane. I adjusted the width of the top part, or top line here, so that it more closely resembled that of her mane here. And then I ensured that our curve of our bottom part of her mane actually went in and tucked behind our our upper line. And the reason I do that, obviously, is because if you see this line going up beyond this one, then it just, well, it looks like that. So to fix that, as you can see from what I just pulled off there, all I did was draw in a new fill between the upper layer here and this one, where you can find right here. So you can see that this line is below our other path of her mane, and to fix it, all you had to do is draw a solid fill that's the same color as her mane in between the two. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward. Another simple change I made was with her hair tie here. I simply took the red fill layer that we had and bumped it up in front of these two, but also moved this layer for our line here in front of the hair tie fill, so that way it looks like it's behind this one but in front of the others. That one's a fairly simple change again. Now her ear was a slightly more difficult. I had to use my own width profile down here that I created before, and I think I should have shown you in part 5. But I also had to make adjustments by using the width tool to actually click and drag. Oh, not like that though. Grabbing the middle of it, if I can actually grab it. I moved it farther back so you got the better tapered look to her ear that more closely resembles the one you see in the actual reference. So this was way too thin. And again, to fix our line here that would have been showing up past our ear, I actually adjusted a single side of the line, which again you can do by double clicking and adjusting, as you can see here, side 1 0 pixels wide, but side 2 is still 1.5, which basically tapers off only one side to hide behind the ear. It looks like it's going and tucking in behind it, while the other one is just going straight back. And then with this line here, for her mane, I did the same thing as I did with the upper part of her mane here, which I showed you just a few seconds ago. Just putting in a solid fill that's the same color as her body to cover where the line was going past the line of her ear. Now, the most difficult change I had to do for the upper part of her body here was this little corner right here, actually. Now, this just happens sometimes because of our width profile and brush definition. When you have your brush definition as basic, it is going to give you those sharp points at every angle, except for the rare occasion when your lines meet too steeply at an angle and it just stunts the corner for some reason. To fix that, you actually have to break these lines into two separate ones and then use a width profile that tapers them off to a point to make it look like it's a single line meeting at that point there. That's fairly difficult, so to actually go into some detail here, I'm going to isolate this. As you can see, hopefully this does taper off, going to a, if it allows me to click, here we go, 0 points. And then if we click off of it, this line also goes to 0 points, tapers like that. But they end at the exact same anchor point, which makes them look like a single line. If you have any questions about exactly how I did that, you can message me via YouTube or DeviantArt, and perhaps I can make something a little more in detail and give you a better example of exactly how I did that in case you're confused. Now, for the bottom part of her body, again, a lot of this was just simple line width issues. Every single point you see here for her legs and for her, well, they're all legs, her front legs and back legs, I simply adjusted the width using our Shift W width tool, and as you can see here, I dragged the line. So this is what it looked like before, and all I did was drag the full width up about halfway. I'll do that twice, and again, that is achieved just by taking the farthest most anchor and dragging the width up like that. So, okay. What else did we do? That's pretty much the same thing I did for that leg. This one, I believe, yes, I just bumped it down to 2 points instead of 3 because it was too thick here. It looked a little funky, so I changed that. And then her hair tie here was the most problematic for the bottom part of her body. It was just a layer issue, but at the same time, this line here was going, it's hard to tell here, but it was going in front of our hair tie and actually sticking out a bit past our tail. To fix that, I actually had to adjust the one anchor here from being something like that right in this area to actually moving it up. Oop. Sort of like that. And it made it look a little bit more natural than what it was before. Let's undo that. Alright. And that's about all the changes I made for our vector. And this is the part of the stage, if you follow me on DeviantArt when I'm doing requests, if I say finalizing, that's all I'm doing. I'm making those little tiny changes to make our vector look more perfect, if you will. Okay, so now that we've made all the changes we needed to, we're going to add her cutie mark, which is our last and final thing that we need to do. To do that, we're going to have to find a reference to use. You can try to trace off of her body, especially in a shot like this where it's fairly prominent. I prefer to use my own, however. So I've saved a lot of ones that I've drawn myself. There it is. And this pretty much, all I did was find a reference image somewhere on the interweb saved and downloaded that file, and then traced my own copy, so that way I'm not hurting anyone necessarily by doing this. So you trace your own, vectorize your own, save it on your computer, so that way it's your own shape that you can just copy and paste. If you need further explanation on that, you can shoot me a question on exactly how I did this, but pretty much, again, same way we're drawing our vector for our pony, you're just drawing the vector for the cutie mark. And then you're just going to select this. Again, this is the part where RGB matters, keeping everything uniform. If this was, for example, in CMYK, we're going to actually color settings. No, excuse me, document color mode. This was in CMYK, for example, and I try to copy this over to here, and actually it looks fine, but that might be because I already opened it. RGB. Yeah, the reason it looks the same, the issue would be here is if I had drawn these shapes while it was in CMYK, they would be a different color value. You'll just have to trust me on that one. But alright, so again, eliminating body fill so we can see what we're working with. We're going to size these down holding shift so they size evenly. Alright, how does that look? It's not bad. We'll save that. And that'll be it. All we have to do now is drag this. You can either drag or you can copy in case you ever want to go back and change anything, but we're pretty much done here. You can drag your vector, your finished vector, after we unlock everything, down onto your, wow, okay, down onto your artboard, and there you go. You have your finished vector of Applejack. Now, we could add a sofa and such, but that is, again, a tutorial for another day. So, that is all I have for you as far as changes that you have to make at the end. And just a couple tips for you. As I mentioned before, there is no one right way to draw a vector. This is just sort of the way I do things, or at least that I used to do things when just copying straight from the show. Now, other people I have found out like or prefer to draw our outline, as we see here, the outline of her body and mane and so forth, using a slightly different method than the one I showed you. I'm just going to share that with you really quick, so that way I don't seem completely biased in how I do things. Now, the reason I don't do this is because I find that it can be sometimes a bit less accurate than the way I do things. So, the way you can do it, if you want to do this method instead of the one I showed you, all you're doing is treating these lines the same as you do for the body fill. You take, let me sample the right color here. You take your pen tool, just like you would for your line, switch your fill color to the outline color and your line color to actually be void or blank. And you draw as best you can following the outline of her curve or her line. And then you simply click and follow on the outside of her anchor. Now, I'm not going to take too much time with this because, again, we're already done with our vector. And I already showed you how to do this. I'm sorry. Pardon me. Now, as you can see here, it's not quite even all the way across. And again, this was just a quick sketch. And that's the reason I actually don't use this method, because it varies through the line if you don't do it quite right. But again, some of her lines do vary as they go. As you can see with her nose and her ear, the line does change as you go along, and it's not always exactly 100% even. It's not always going to be the thickest at the center and the thinnest at the end. So some people prefer this method, and it also actually works very well for when you're enlarging your image, because with, let me delete this. Oh, I should have our selection. With our drawing that we have here, if I was to enlarge this, AJ, to, let's say, this big, you can see that her lines actually look a lot thinner now because they've been expanded. So the larger you make your lines, the thinner that weight is that you had. The 3-point weight is going to look much, much thinner in a large image than it would in a smaller one. And you can see I accidentally let go over tail there. But yeah, so it looks thicker in that. So if you ever do this, you'd actually have to manually go and make all your lines heavier to look the same. So that can be a pain if you ever want to do resizing. Now, if you did the way I just showed you that other variation, when you would adjust it, it would still look the exact same weight, because instead of being a solid line, it's a fill. And making that fill bigger is the same thing as just taking a circle and enlarging it. There's no difference. It looks bigger because it is bigger. Whereas your lines are actually, though they are the same weight, they look smaller because there's more fill and less line. Hopefully I made that clear and exactly how that works. Alright, what other tips do I have for you? Resizing I showed you the other way you can draw lines. That's about it. The only other thing you have to worry about is shadows. I didn't draw a shadow because, again, she's sitting on our sofa here, and only the sofa has a shadow, not any of the ponies. But if you were to draw a shadow, all you have to do, typically I use a circle. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you make it a black fill, solid black fill. And I typically do about 20% opacity, and I find that looks pretty good most of the time. You obviously want to make sure that this is the farthest back out of all the layers. Gonna have to keep going. There we go. So finally, that's in the very back, and that's what it would look like if you were to draw a shadow. And it's pretty simple. And again, it looks ridiculous here because she's supposed to be sitting on something, but I actually didn't draw that. But that's how you create your shadow if you would want one. Okay. Well, that's about all I had to share with you on how to draw vectors. Hopefully, as I promised from part 1 of this tutorial, if you knew absolutely nothing about Adobe Illustrator or drawing vectors, after watching all of these all the way through, you have become a complete expert. Well, maybe not complete expert, but you're at least able to draw vectors on your own now using this method that I taught you. And hopefully, if you decide to try this out on your own, please feel free to share anything you do with me, and feel free to credit me in your work if you feel extremely generous. And if you have any other questions about how I did anything here, or how I do anything I do on DeviantArt that you might not know exactly how I did it, please feel free to ask. I'm a very open and friendly person, as you can tell, hopefully. And I would be happy to talk with any of you. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it, and all the time you took into watching this tutorial, because it took me a lot of time to make it. So my love to all of you guys. I hope you have a great week, and hope to see you again sometime soon. Take care.